Governor Hogan recently announced an initiative that we've been talking to the Maryland Department of Environment about for some time regarding the Bay Restoration Fund from about 2008-2009, and it's worked to great success to update all of our wastewater treatment plants to the highest functioning, lowest pollution rates in the country, really. And now all of our major wastewater treatment plants are completed, and the Hogan administration has proposed to take some of the money in the Bay Restoration Fund and purchase typically agricultural, but other types of best management practices, BMPs, that would reduce pollution going into our waterways. We think that the state investment in low-cost, cost-efficient pollution reduction is wise. I think there's a lot of open questions we're still exploring about, how long would this program run, how long would the BMPs, the best management practices, have to be in the ground for, a lot of those details, so that, stay tuned for all the negotiation that will happen over the session over that. There are a number of other proposals for this money that I think we'll have to deal with throughout the session, but that's, typical. Really, I think many people in this room would agree that if you can have a low-cost, high-efficiency way to reduce pollution permanently, it's a good idea. But as with many pieces of legislation, the devil's in the details. So stay tuned for further information on that. All I want to say about the budget is that we are facing a big shortfall in revenue. That does lead to hard decisions. That does lead to decisions between competing priorities that might be both, all very important things to be funding. But we know that the budget is very hard for even the most knowledgeable lobbyists to sometimes follow and understand. But it is important that the budget committees hear from the public about what they think your state dollars should be going towards. Since we are facing a shortfall, we're keeping a close eye on our environmental funds. I'm pleased to say that the governor's announcement did show that he was going to continue funding those important environmental initiatives. But as Kristen just mentioned, it's equally important that there are well-funded, well-resourced agencies to implement the great laws that our General Assembly passes. So that will be a big ticket item. There are going to be tough choices. We might call on you again to say, hey, this really, we'd like you to contact people to fund these things or that thing. But just know it's going to be a tough year, and we are going to be watching that closely. Thanks.
So for 2017, looking ahead, we're just going to scroll through these. Obviously, one of the primary focuses of the historic preservation community is the restoration of preservation grant funding. Increased funding for our state tax credit. I'm going to go into a little detail on each of these. Local review of what we're referring to as dispersed energy projects. Increased funding for our state heritage areas, and also maintaining funding for Main Street and the Department of Housing and Community Development programs. So the request that we made of the administration was $500,000 for each of those programs to get them back into the budget for a grand total of $1.5 million. We also would love to see, of course, increased funding for our state tax credit. This is a staggering number. Maryland invests $9 million a year in our state tax credit program, and if you like the idea of government partnering with private enterprise to save historic places, government can't go it alone, we recognize that, then this is a great way to do that. The program returns $8 to the economy for every $1 that it costs our state treasury. So it's a phenomenal return on investment for Maryland. Virginia, to our south, puts $100 million a year into their state rehab tax credit program. We put $9 million a year into it. And one project alone is eligible for getting $3 million. So the Phillips packing plant, which some of you may be familiar with in Cambridge, got a $3 million tax credit appropriation. That's wonderful, but that's a third of the entire program for the entire state. So I think that we can do at least a third as good as Virginia. I'm sure that our legislators would think, well, at least Maryland is a third as good as Virginia. And so, or maybe we could be as good as Virginia, I don't know. But we would love to see that back up to at least 30 million. And we picked that number not just out of the sky, but that's how many qualified, eligible applications are coming in on a yearly basis for projects that would move forward but for this funding. Okay. This is another one that is something that's very concerning to us. is these sort of dispersed energy projects that are popping up all throughout ag areas. We are obviously extremely supportive of renewable energy, but we think that everyone should play by the same rules. And so we think that energy projects should have to follow and be in line with local land use policy. And there is some state law that allows the Public Service Commission, and some of you may be familiar with this in Kent County, to exempt projects from that. And so this is an area where we think there are other great places for these types of projects to go, not in critical ag areas, which also happen to be cultural landscapes. We'd like to see level funding for our Main Street and our Department of Housing and Community Development programs. A lot of great projects on the shore have been funded through this, and so we just want to see level funding. Briefly, I know we said we're talking state politics, but on the federal side, if some of the programs that we know are threatened on the federal side, if they go away, a lot of the state programs, at least in historic preservation, at the state side will be effectively meaningless, particularly when it comes to our state tax credit. We know that comprehensive tax reform is coming up. We know that the federal rehab tax credit, which made this project possible, which is what will make the Phillips project possible, and many other projects all across Maryland, is severely threatened.
You have copies of our legislative agenda, so I'll be very brief. But each year we go and try and fight for open space funding. Some of you in the room may be surprised. According to Partners for Open Space Coalition, we have, since 1969, the inception of the program Open Space, which, by the way, is the premier preservation program in the entire state. Most of the states across the, or pardon me, the entire country, most of the states in the country have modeled their preservation programs after what Maryland does. So in 1969, Program Open Space was put together. This includes Mautz, the Maryland Annapolis Land Conservation Foundation, as well as other rural legacy fundings, which keeps ag land continuous, and of course what you see in your own parks and other spaces. So we're going to continue to support open space funding, and also we put in here smart growth and revitalization funding in general. Where we are at now, of course, we're a product of good investment from the state, so we're going to continue to support those efforts. And I already see a mistake in our agenda about the Sustainable Communities Tax Credit, which is now called the Maryland Heritage Structure Rehabilitation Tax Credit. It just rolls right off the tongue. But this program alone is our 25,000 jobs from 1994 till about 2 years ago officially. And then the last piece is here. We've been working with Maryland Association of Counties to try to find some better resolutions. Our organization, we fully understand the Eastern Shore, in case you don't know, is commonly known. We're the third most vulnerable area in the entire country to the effects of climate change. And if you're losing 6 acres of land in the MidShore alone every year, or I've heard every month, I want to say every year to be conservative about it. Either way, sea level's rising. So we need to have renewable energy, but it needs to be done the right way that doesn't take away from our agriculture or our heritage areas or any of these.
So the first thing that is on our agenda this year is an override of the Clean Energy Jobs Act veto. This is a bill that it's called the Clean Energy Jobs Act because it is a bill that will increase the green energy economy and the ability for solar and wind companies to be able to hire Maryland workers for renewable growth resources.
We're going to be putting forward, and this is basically focused on, okay, if you have animals and they're sick, absolutely they should have antibiotics, but there's a big problem when you start pumping animals with a lot of human antibiotics when they're not sick, that can really start breeding basically, I'm sure a lot of people have heard like the term super germs. Has anyone here heard that term?
Yes.
Yeah. Basically resistant bacteria that can be a big, huge human health impact. So we're going to be exploring ways that we can make sure that that doesn't happen, that they're not used as growth promoters or other things. A number of integrators and such have already made a lot of strides to take antibiotics out for that kind of use. but not all of them. So we're going to be working to see how we can get the rest of the way there. And then next, I want to talk about a styrofoam ban. And this is, if you go to pictures taken on one of our bay cleanup, a lot of styrofoam just sitting in the Chesapeake Bay at certain points especially. It's about 30% of our landfill space is actually styrofoam because it's you can't compact it very well, and when it breaks down, it just breaks down to smaller pieces until it becomes like fish food, and that can be an issue when you start eating fish. But this has actually already been tried in a lot of Maryland to success. About 1/3 of Maryland's population actually already lives in places that have local styrofoam bans, and they've found that in a lot of cases, I think in Montgomery County, for example, they were saying it's actually cost neutral. It costs just as much to get paper as it does the styrofoam. So this is not all styrofoam. It's like for when you go to the takeouts and you get those oyster shell clam things, or the a styrofoam cup, that kind of stuff. Things that are easily, you can easily and cheaply switch them out for something else. And we'll be exploring things for having things like waivers if it's real hardship for certain businesses and things like that. Exploring those different options.
But there's one other issue that is a hot priority for the environmental community this year that I wanted to mention, which is a ban on fracking. 2 years ago, in 2015, the Maryland General Assembly passed a 2.5-year moratorium on fracking. That was 2015, so the moratorium ends in October 2017. That means that this is the year that we need to ban the practice for good. And we will be working on that with there are 140 organizations statewide who are working in conjunction towards this end. Even if the regulations were bulletproof, and they aren't, regulations are only as good as enforcement. And this is has been a growing problem, not only in Maryland as the state agencies, but in local agencies, and this is true across the country. And we are expecting that federal regulations, federal enforcement will be diminishing in the next administration. There is not a legislative item per se. There's not a bill dealing with enforcement, but we will be working with the budget committees to try to increase enforcement. This is something that has been building for years over several administrations as state agencies' budgets and staffing has been cut. As an example, there was an issue of concern in this past General Assembly, and the budget committees asked for a joint chairman's report from the Maryland Department of the Environment to talk about their enforcement capacity. That report was due on September 30th. It has still not been released. It has still not been presented. And those are the kinds of reports that help guide the administration in terms of making their budget decisions. So this is a statewide problem. This is a problem across the agencies, especially the environmental agencies, and we will be doing whatever we can to beef that up.
Recently, in the past couple months, and a year or so, we've seen some threats to that progress. Just about a year ago, the governor put a pause on local oyster restoration right here in our backyard in Tread Avenue, which eventually got resumed, but it potentially jeopardized some federal funding, and it sort of jeopardized the whole idea of oyster restoration. And so, looking a little bit more recently, just a few months ago, the governor also rolled back the requirement for the best available technology of septic systems to be used on any new development. Well, we all live on the Eastern Shore here in a flat area, and we have a very shallow groundwater, and we know that you don't have to live in the critical area to impact local groundwater and our local tributaries. And so it's important that we're implementing the best available technology, any opportunity we can get. And then also recently, we've seen the Department of Agriculture roll back some of the winter manure applications and allowing some of our agricultural farmers to apply manure later into the season when we know the plants aren't uptaking the nutrients and allowing those nutrients potentially to run off into our waters. So we've seen over the past several years a lot of progress being made and a lot of offense from our partners here. Well, what we see coming up in the next General Assembly is a switch of the game and the need for a hard defense. And so you can see our priority areas up here on the screen here. And so we feel that it's going to be ever so important this year, more than ever, to get into the General Assembly and start playing a little bit of defense to prevent any more of these local rollbacks. And so one of the areas we're going to be touching on is agricultural and nutrient management. 2 years ago, we got the phosphorus management tool passed. We're going to be doing everything we can to make sure that progresses towards implementation. Oyster restoration, oysters, oysters, oysters. Right in our backyard, we have the most exciting oyster restoration work going on in the world. And there's a lot of threats right now to open those sanctuaries for harvest. And so you can bet we'll be doing everything possible to make sure that we maintain protection of our sanctuaries. In addition to that, fight to make sure that our administration is using science-based management when they're making decisions. And then also some non-point source issues as well. As I mentioned, the septic systems. We need to make sure that we can cut that off as soon as possible and manage septic pollution every which way we can. And then also fracking, as was mentioned as well. We might think on the Eastern Shore here that fracking doesn't affect us, but you can bet if fracking is allowed throughout Maryland, that we're going to see an impact here in our bay and in our local waters. So we're going to be doing everything we can to be a voice for the fracking, for not fracking throughout the state of Maryland.
We are going into this year's budget, as you well know, with a shortfall. That shortfall is offset because of some savings realized for this year. Next year, it looks a little better if the economy keeps chugging along and progressing. But 2 years from now, it doubles and then it triples because we need to be able to make sure that our revenues match our spending. So that's going to be really important. And as a member of the Budget and Tax Committee, guess what? People always come to me for money. We were invited to lunch the other day, and we were asked for we were asked for what, $10 million. The budget's already working its way through. And every day somebody will text me or email me with, Addie, how do we get money in the budget? Well, guess what? I don't put money in the budget. The governor puts the money in the budget. As a member of the Budget and Tax Committee or a member of the House Appropriations Committee, guess what we get to do? We get to get scissors out and we get to cut it. And then people lobby and do their thing to be able to figure out where they're going to horse trade to get it back in the budget. I'm sharing that with you because I think it's really important that as a group, as a coalition of folks who are concerned about our historic preservation, conservation of our farmland and our rural way of life and all that goes with that, it would be really important to come in with one voice with priorities so that everybody's supporting some of the same initiatives, because we can't, any of us, have the whole enchilada. We've got to figure out how we balance that, how we get a little bit this year and we work on more next year, and maybe we switch it around, because we do want to work together. We work in a bipartisan fashion as the Eastern Shore delegation. And we want to make sure, I want to make sure that the voices of all our citizens are heard. So that means balance, which means I may not agree with everything on the agenda. But there are things that we can agree with and we can work on. I know Johnny Mautz is working on how do we get more of our communities to use LED lights. When the state puts in a project, they have these wonderful LED lights, and guess what? Everybody loves them. They want them all over town. Well, how do we make that happen? He'll tell you about that. Chris has been working on, because we have small towns. Yes, the Chesapeake Bay Restoration Fund was one of the best things I think the Ehrlich administration ever did. And we're seeing the cleanup in the bay because of that. But you know what? We've got a lot of small communities that you're concerned about. They'll never be able to afford their wastewater treatment costs to upgrade not only to BNR, but to get to ENR. Let's figure out how to do that, and we've got a way to do that. So that'll be another initiative that we hope we all can work together again on, because as we bring those together, I work with the Maryland Environmental Trust. we're trying to figure out how we can build that across the state so that we can get more private monies in to be able to do more preservation and get those easements done. And how can government provide what they do best, but yet leave room for the public sector to be involved in that? And I'm just going to stop with that because there are a number of things that I've been thinking about that I think we can work together on. Like I said, I'm more concerned, I'm as concerned about the heroin opiate crisis and what's going to happen down the road with significant mental illness and behavioral health, but I'm also concerned about how we each practice our behaviors when it comes to stewardship of our land and our environment. So thank you.
So as my colleague talked about balance, I have to find it every day. I have to find it with our farmers, I have to find it with our environmentalists, I have to find it with our recreational watermen as well as our commercial watermen. And I don't know who I aggravated last year, but I got put on that oyster restoration committee. And I'm trying to think something that's equally as painful. You know, I never really liked going to the dentist much when I was a kid, but I made sure that I made my appointments on Friday because I knew I had to endure them before I got to the weekend, which I loved. And this is something that I have to do to make sure that we find what we need for clean water, our oysters, but also to sustain a absolute legacy, not an industry or a business, but a family engagement in working our waters in the state. So I could go down the list. I was writing some things, modestly the things that I've done when I was in the House, Red G Fund. When I look at how hard my hair went from salt, pepper to white when we worked for 3 years on offshore wind, and on and on and on. I worked last year to support the RPS bill and all, and I'm going to support it. And I've talked to the governor, and I told him, you know, look, this is something that's been my mantra. Renewable energy is important to me, and I respect what you're trying to do to protect people's bills and all that. Mr. Governor, you can clap loud if you want. It surely helps, but you know, but when I get my scorecard, it's not going to be 100% of you guys. I don't know what it is today, 62, 70, but in some cases it's not good enough. And when the Hudson family sits down there under siege from lawsuits, and they're from water keepers, and their children can't sleep at night for fear that the family farm is going to be taken away from them, I don't think that's a description of what working together is. So I'm not here to chastise, but you see I'm here, and I made it my business to be here tonight. Because as my daughter Lauren carries her first child and is about to give birth at the end of February or the 1st of March, and her husband, you know, and my son Trevor is up at medical school, up at University of Maryland Medical School, and has his boat, one of the very first things he bought with his own money before he got his driver's license and all. I want to make sure that that water and the yield remains sustainable for him so he can go out there, and that child that Lauren, I hope our mouth to God's ears, is born healthy. But at the same point in time, I have to make sure that there's an industry here. An industry that provides jobs and makes certain that all the other stuff that goes on here on the Eastern Shore throughout Maryland is sustainable. So I started talking about sustainability, Alan. And that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to work, hopefully, with you. And when we're not able to vote together, I hope that it's a vote that you understand, that I can explain, and we can go forward to the next issue. So, I'm thankful for your help. I appreciate our relationship. And I encourage you, not only over the next 90 days, but always, as long as I want to continue to serve, and I'm going to run again in 2018. And hopefully you can put that person in my campaign, but if you can't, if my scores aren't good enough, I just want you to know why. It's because I made sure that I represented all the Eastern Shore and their needs. And I hope that is the best explanation. and understanding that you can have a Major Mathias on Senate Finance Committee, and I invite you up to visit with us, not only the next 90 days, but always. God bless you, and thanks for being here tonight.
Thank you, Alan, and it's always challenging when you have me follow Senator Mathias. A great speaker and a great advocate for the Eastern Shore, and let me just share our agreement that we are a united front for the Eastern Shore delegation. I'm Chris Adams, District 37B, so I live in Wicomico County in Hebron, covered Talbot, Dorchester, Caroline, but from District 38 down to all the way to 36, you'll find wide agreement and how we try to resolve issues for the citizens of our Eastern Shore, both business and recreational, people who care about the land, care about the rivers. I'm a fifth generation Eastern Shoreman, so I carry my heritage from Somerset County, Deal Island, Dames Quarter. I know how to fish. I know where to look for those fish. I've got 3 children. The oldest one's 18. I've got a 16 and a 15-year-old. And I want them to have the same kind of Eastern Shore that I've always had, which includes the beauty of the Eastern Shore. It includes the water, it includes the farmland, but it also includes the economic opportunity and the reason for them wanting to stay on the Eastern Shore. That is the balance from my vantage point, being fairly new in the legislature. I do serve on the sister committee to Senator Mathias. I serve on Economic Matters Committee, and so we hear some of the same issues that Senate Finance hears. I'll give you 2 quick stories. I'll not take too terribly much time here going through. I'll tell you a story of how I couldn't find agreement with an issue that probably matters to many of you, and then I'll share another story on something I'm working on where I'm going to be asking for some support this coming session that I'm sure you'll want to hear from. But last year, we had the Clean Energy Jobs Act come through our committee, the RPS standard, as I understood it, and Delegate Frick was the sponsor of that bill in the House, and I remember him and I having multiple discussions. He wanted my vote in our committee on that. He wanted a bipartisan vote in committee, and he and I talked a great deal about that. That was a long bill. I asked a lot of questions of what that bill involved, how it's going to impact the business community, how is it really going to help the Eastern Shore, and both on jobs but also the environment. That bill, basically on the 11th hour, was gutted. It was a bill that I saw cut 80% of all the verbiage, and then it was replaced with, and we'll never know what I don't remember, frankly, what was replaced with it. But I didn't have time on the 11th hour to review that bill and come to a conclusion as to whether or not I can or can't support it. And my one rule of thumb is if I don't understand what I'm voting for, my answer is no. And my answer is no on that vote. And in fact, I'm familiar with the scoring that the group here has, and I was scored on that no vote. So while I have a lower percentage than Senator Mathias, let me just tell you, that was a frustrating score, because I want to try to develop bipartisan consensus on issues that matter to you, because as I said from the very beginning, I am of the Eastern Shore and I care a great deal about these issues. Now, the issue that I think that we'll find some wide agreement on, I got a call from the town of Preston roughly about 2 months ago, and they said, Chris, we've got a challenge here, and we would like very much for you to come up and hear what our concern is. Within a half hour of getting that call, drove to Preston and listened to the concern they had, which was simply this: that they were under consent order to improve their lagoon system, the wastewater treatment plant, to the BNR, the biological nutrient removal system. Very expensive, but they were availing themselves of the Bay Restoration Fund to finance this to the benefit of their citizens. The challenge is, as they're going through this process, they would like very much for this to be a one fell swoop, not only to do the BNR, but also the enhanced nutrient removal. And the reason why they can't do that, as they're sharing with me, is that because it's a 2-step process. The way that the law is written, I have to do first the BNR, the biological nutrient removal, and then I can come back at a later date and try to get grant funding for enhanced nutrient removal. So for the town of Preston, what this means is right now their lagoon system for total nitrogen is 18 to 21 milligrams per liter is what their output right now is. To go from where they are today to BNR, they will reduce that down to 8 milligrams per liter. Or if, and the legislation we're trying to pass passes this year, we can get them to ENR, they will run their total nitrogen coming out of their system from 18 to 21 all the way down to 3 milligrams per liter. How they're going to do this is avail themselves of the Bay Restoration Fund, for which there are $70 million, I'm told, available. And not only will Preston benefit from a piece of legislation that I'm going to sponsor and work with the administration on, but other towns that are minor, small towns like Galliana, Betterton, Chesapeake City, Harborview, Oxford, Secretary, East Newmarket, which is my hometown, or in my district, Cheltenham, College of Southern Maryland, Deep Creek Lake, Elk Neck State Park, Preston, of course, and Smith Island. So what I mean to share with you is that we care a great deal about how to improve the environment. Well, one of the ways that we can do that and have a direct and significant impact is to help these small communities afford and finance significant upgrades to their wastewater treatment plant. In my opinion, we might disagree on this on its face, but in my agreement, if we're going to spend money as a state and have an economic impact on the state, do it where we're going to get some real impact. And I believe that we can do that through improving these small wastewater treatment plants. So I'm here asking for your support in moving that legislation forward. I'm cross-filing that with Senator Eckardt. And what I need to share with you in conclusion is I care a great deal about the Eastern Shore. I have to find my places sometimes to do that, but I'm a good listener. After I was elected, our first opportunity to speak and talk was with Alan and his leader group. I remember it like it was yesterday. And I thank you for continuing to engage with me and with the delegation. I'm proud to be here tonight and also part of this wonderful delegation as we advance our interests together. So thank you.
And I listened to Senator Eckardt, and I listened to Senator Mathias, and I cannot encapsulate a better message for this group, which is a fantastic group, and other groups outside this room. We're talking about working together, having one voice, representing your district, listening to people. I'm going to my 3rd year in the state legislature, and after a while, you see us so much and you hear from us so much, you think we've been there for a long time, but we learn every day as we're evolving in this role as a representative from your community. And we're going into a new phase in the legislature. This is the 3rd year of a 4-year term. Things become a little more significant. I think the emotions get a little more excited. People are looking at what's happening politically, and there's a rush. There's a push to do things. Sometimes that can be very, very difficult and can be can have a very negative effect. And I'm going to say something a little bit political because I don't know what everybody's view is, but transportation funding, I think, is an example where there was a rush to make a political move that wasn't correctly thought out. It could have been done in a better way based off of the goal that was driving the people who did what they did. When we start talking about protecting the environment, that's something we all cherish. It's something we all want to do. Senator Eckardt, you talked, it was wonderful, bringing everybody together, one voice, priorities, who's speaking, whose agenda, how are we going to do this? That's absolutely critical. And Senator Mathias, representing your district, I just want to share this with everyone. This is a great room. Everyone here is, you're involved in the community, you're doing great things. But there's other rooms within our district that they've got other challenges. I distinctly remember a firehouse breakfast, and a volunteer fireman, he said, "Johnny, thank you for what you're doing. I appreciate the work." He stuck his hand out, and I shook his hand, and he said, "When you go back to Annapolis, I want you to tell everybody there, we're starving over here." There's a group of people who are still economically struggling. We have not recovered from the recession. There are some severe challenges, and when we have to balance what's going on in the community with our priorities and agendas. It's funny because the enforcement was mentioned. Kristen mentioned enforcement, and I was listening, and all the calls that I receive are people who are complaining that MDE is enforcing too much. But I have an open mind, and I want to know where they aren't enforcing, and that's something that's going to be a lot of interest. And Senator Mathias was joking about doing something wrong and getting put on the Oyster Advisory Commission. And we've got most of the oystermen in our district, so he's been catering to our constituents, District 37 constituents, getting to know them real well. And so I got involved. I'm on the Oyster Advisory Commission, you know, and it's a hugely important issue for our district. But people are starting to look at me like I'm an oyster also. And so when Senator Eckardt talked about me doing LED lights, I'd like to get a new nickname as Johnny LED. So whenever you flip, so if you can turn and flip on those LED lights, you can think about me. But seriously, we're on, Chris and I, we've had a great experience first 2 years. I think the third year is going to also be a wonderful experience. It's going to be a lot of work. We both serve on the Economic Matters Committee, not the Environmental Matters Committee, but we do have the energy issues that come to our committee. And our most valuable resource is sitting right here in the room. And I think just about, well, most of the people in the room I recognize, and you've spoken to me about one thing or another. And as I wind up my remarks, I just want to say thank you for your support, your input, your patience, because I haven't always been there. I have not always been there for you, but I've always been there to hear you, and I always do hear you, and I do listen. And it's funny to mention that. I got a prime example, but what was it? Something else. No, it was the LED lights. When the LED lights first came out, they were these squiggly little light bulbs that looked like a pretzel. I couldn't stand them, all right? I just didn't want to get near them. I didn't like them. I made fun of them. You know, we had nicknames for them. Now, the only light bulbs I buy in my home are LED lights. And I'll revert back to some of the proposals that were mentioned earlier. I also remember being in, so same like it was middle school, we had a program on styrofoam. You know, why are we using styrofoam? There's so many alternatives to styrofoam. You know, it's so hard to deal with this stuff after people have used it. And I grew up in a world that was filled with styrofoam. I got a lot of styrofoam in my lifetime. And so I went home, I told everybody we should switch to paper. And they got really upset and they didn't want to hear about it. So I'm very interested to hear about what we can do about styrofoam, because I might end up eventually winning that argument. So God bless everybody. Thank you for your support, and have a great night.